It was one of those San Francisco nights where the fog rolled in like a slow, quiet guest, cool, damp, and impossible to ignore. The city's skyline glittered under a soft blanket of low clouds, and inside a sleek glass-walled event space perched above the Embarcadero, the air buzzed with something sharper than just conversation. It was the kind of place where venture capitalists rubbed shoulders with Michelin-starred chefs, where climate scientists debated food futurists over glasses of zero-proof botanical cocktails, and where innovation wasn't just talked about, it was plated, served, and expected to impress. Elon had shown up late as usual. He'd just wrapped a Neuralink demo in Palo Alto and arrived in a black Tesla Cybertruck that looked more like a prop from a sci-fi movie than a real vehicle. He wore the same outfit he'd had on all day. Dark jeans, a fitted black t-shirt, and that slightly tired but wired expression people had come to recognize from 1,000 interviews. Cameras flashed as he walked in, but he barely glanced at them. He wasn't here for the photo ops. He was here because someone had told him the food would change how you think about eating, and Elon, ever the skeptic, always wanted to test bold claims. At the center of the room stood the chef, a man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a low knot, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and hands that moved with the calm precision of someone who'd spent decades mastering fire, timing, and flavor. He wasn't flashy. No tattoos, no loud laugh, no social media persona built on viral stunts. He'd earned his stars the old-fashioned way, by making people feel something with a single bite. That night, he'd prepared a 9-course tasting menu built entirely around rescued ingredients, vegetables that supermarkets had rejected for being ugly, surplus grains from local farms, even coffee grounds repurposed into delicate chocolate ganache. Every dish told a story about waste, care, and second chances. Guests sat at long communal tables made from reclaimed redwood. Soft jazz played in the background, not loud enough to drown out conversation, but just enough to keep the mood light. Elon took a seat near the front, flanked by a couple of engineers from his AI team and a sustainability advisor from Tesla. The first few courses came out: tiny spoons of chilled carrot consommé with edible flowers, a crisp wafer made from spent grain, a single oyster topped with fermented seaweed foam. People murmured appreciatively. Some even closed their eyes after tasting. Then came the main event, a dish the chef had spent weeks perfecting. A dome of compressed root vegetables, beets, parsnips, celeriac, slow roasted in their own juices, wrapped in a translucent sheet of mushroom mycelium, grown in a lab. Yes, but entirely edible and carbon negative. Drizzled with a reduction made from bruised plums and kombu. It sat on a slate plate dusted with powdered seaweed and garnished with microgreens grown under solar-powered LEDs. It looked like something from the future, but tasted deeply, comfortingly earthy. The chef himself brought it to Elon's table. He didn't say much, just a quiet, "I hope you enjoy this." There was no expectation, no performance, just offering. Elon picked up his fork, poked at the dome, then took a bite. He chewed slowly. His face didn't change. He swallowed. Then, without looking up, he turned to the person next to him, a food tech investor, and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, "Honestly, this tastes like battery acid mixed with wet cardboard." Did they run out of real food and just serve us lab leftovers? A few people laughed nervously. Others froze. The chef, who was just a few feet away refilling water glasses, stopped mid-step. His back stiffened, but he didn't turn around. He kept walking, though his pace slowed like he was carrying something heavy. Someone at the next table whispered, "Dude, that's the chef." Elon shrugged. "I'm just being honest. If you're gonna charge $300 a plate, it should taste like food, not a science experiment." The comment might have died right there, in the hushed discomfort of a room full of people too polite to call out a billionaire, if it hadn't been for a guest near the back who'd been filming the whole evening for a culinary podcast. She caught the whole exchange on her phone. 10 minutes later, she posted a 22-second clip to social media with the caption, "When disruptive means disrespecting the hands that feed you." Within an hour, it had 50,000 views. By midnight, it was trending. Online, the reaction split down predictable lines. Musk fans called it classic Elon, no filter, just truth. Food lovers, chefs, and sustainability advocates were furious. "He eats $200 burgers but mocks a dish made from rescued food," one commenter wrote. "This isn't honesty, it's arrogance wrapped in a hoodie." A popular food critic tweeted, "Calling someone's life work battery acid isn't critique. It's cruelty disguised as candor." Back at the event, the mood had soured. People spoke in lower voices. The chef finished serving the final course, a delicate panna cotta made from oat milk and honey from rooftop hives, but didn't return to the dining room. He stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes alongside his team, his face unreadable. Elon, meanwhile, seemed unaware of the storm brewing. He left shortly after dessert, waving off a reporter who tried to ask about the meal. "Great crowd," he said, climbing into his Cybertruck. "Lot of smart people here." But by the next morning, the story had legs. News outlets picked it up. Late-night comedians made jokes. Memes flooded Twitter, photoshopped images of Elon eating a car battery with a fork, captions like Musk's 5-star review. Even some of his usual allies in the tech world stayed quiet, sensing the optics were bad. After all, this wasn't just about food. It was about respect, about who gets to speak and who gets dismissed. What made it sting more was the context. The chef hadn't been showing off. He'd been trying to prove a point that delicious, beautiful food could come from what others throw away. That feeding people well didn't require luxury, just care. And in front of an audience that included food bank directors, urban farmers, and young cooks dreaming of a better food system, that moment of mockery felt like a punch to the gut. For the chef, it wasn't just embarrassment. It was personal. He'd grown up in a household where every grain of rice mattered, where leftovers were never wasted, where cooking was an act of love. He'd spent years fighting to be taken seriously in an industry that often glorified excess over ethics. And now, in one careless sentence, his work had been reduced to a punchline by one of the most powerful men on the planet. He didn't post anything right away. He went home, hugged his kids, and sat on his porch watching the fog roll in, just like the night before. But inside, something was shifting. He wasn't going to disappear. He wasn't going to apologize for trying to do good. If anything, he felt a quiet fire lighting up in his chest. Meanwhile, Elon's team started noticing the fallout. His social media mentions had turned sharply negative. A few eco-conscious investors reached out with concerns. Even his own staff seemed quieter than usual in meetings. One junior designer dared to say, "Maybe we could have handled that differently." Elon frowned. "It was just food," he muttered. But later that night, alone in his office, he watched the clip again. Really watched it. Saw the way the chef's shoulders tensed. Saw the silence that followed his words. For the first time, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt small. Still, he didn't respond publicly. Not yet. He wasn't wired to back down. But something had cracked open, just a little. And in the days that followed, while the internet raged and the chef planned his next move, a strange thing happened. The billionaire who built rockets started wondering if maybe, just maybe, he'd missed the point of the meal entirely. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Because humiliation, when it lands on the right kind of person, doesn't break them, it fuels them. And when pride meets purpose, the collision can spark something no one expects. But that night, all anyone knew was this. A man who fed people with care had been mocked by a man who changed the world with machines. And the world was watching to see what came next. The morning after the dinner, the chef didn't check his phone right away. He made coffee the old way. Ground beans, French press, no rush. He sat at his kitchen table, sunlight just starting to peek through the blinds, and listened to the quiet hum of his neighborhood waking up. Birds, a distant lawnmower, the soft clink of his spoon against the mug. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But when he finally opened his phone, the screen lit up like a warning siren. Notifications poured in, texts from friends, voice notes from fellow chefs, news alerts with his face next to headlines like, "Billionaire roasts chef's lab food," and "Is sustainable cuisine just pretentious waste?" His stomach dropped. He scrolled through the clip, his back turned, Elon's voice sharp and dismissive, and felt a hot wave of shame crawl up his neck. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because in that moment, in front of everyone who mattered to him, he hadn't defended his work. He just walked away. He wanted to disappear, to cancel his upcoming events, shut down his kitchen, maybe even leave the city for a while. But then his youngest child walked in, still in pajamas, rubbing sleep from their eyes. "Dad, are you sad?" they asked, climbing onto his lap like they used to when they were little. He hugged them tight and said, "Just thinking." And in that hug, something shifted. He couldn't vanish. Not when so many people, his team, his kids, the farmers who trusted him with their imperfect produce, were counting on him to keep going. So instead of hiding, he did the opposite. That afternoon he posted a short video. No fancy editing, no dramatic music. Just him standing in his kitchen, wearing a flour-dusted apron, speaking straight to the camera. "Last night someone called my food battery acid," he said, voice calm but steady. "And you know what? Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was made with care, with ingredients that would have been thrown away, with the hope that we can feed more people, waste less, and still find joy in what's on our plates." He paused, looked down for a second, then back up. Being called names doesn't hurt as much as knowing people still go to bed hungry, while good food rots in dumpsters. "So I'm not stopping. I'm doubling down." He called it dignity on a plate, and within hours people started showing up. Not for a fancy-tasting menu, not for Instagrammable plating, but for real food served with respect. He transformed a small, unused lot behind his restaurant into a pop-up kitchen. Just a few folding tables, a donated grill, and crates of rescued vegetables from local grocers. Every day at noon, he and his team cooked simple, nourishing meals. Hearty stews made from surplus squash and beans, flatbreads from day-old grains, fruit salads from bruised peaches and overripe bananas. And for every paying customer who came to support the cause, they served one meal free to someone in need. Word spread fast. Volunteers showed up. College students, retired teachers, even a few off-duty nurses. Someone brought a guitar and started playing softly in the corner. A local artist painted a mural on the side of the building, hands passing a bowl, roots growing into stars. The chef didn't plan any of it. He just kept cooking, and then came the dishes with names. He started calling each meal after someone who'd dismissed sustainable food as niche or impractical. There was the algorithm bowl, a mix of roasted root veggies and lentils, served with a side of pickled onions, named after a tech CEO who once said, "Hunger isn't a tech problem." There was cloud storage casserole, layers of rescued potatoes, kale and cashew cream, a jab at a cloud computing exec who joked that real men eat meat, not moss. And yes, there was one called Battery Acid Surprised, and a bright, tangy beet and citrus salad with toasted seeds, served with a small card that read, "Sometimes what tastes bitter at first reveals sweetness underneath." People loved it. Not just for the food, but for the quiet defiance in it. It wasn't angry. It wasn't petty. It was a statement. You can mock us, but we'll keep feeding people anyway. Meanwhile, across town, Elon was trying to move on. He had rockets to launch, cars to build, brain chips to test. But the chef's video kept popping up. In his feed. In team Slack channels. Even on the news ticker during a SpaceX briefing. One of his engineers quietly said, "My sister volunteered at that pop-up yesterday. She said it felt healing." Elon grunted but didn't respond. Still, that night he found himself watching the video again. This time he noticed the details. The way the chef's hands moved while he spoke, the calm in his eyes, the absence of blame. Just purpose. His PR team, however, was nervous. "This is turning into a brand issue," one advisor said during a strategy call. "Younger consumers, especially the ones we're targeting for Tesla's new sustainability line, are really upset. They see this as tone-deaf." Another added, "We should issue a statement. Maybe donate to a food bank." Elon frowned. "I don't do damage control for telling the truth." "But was it the truth?" someone asked gently. "Or just your opinion dressed up as fact?" He didn't answer. But later that week, at a press event for Starlink's rural internet expansion, a reporter raised their hand. "Mr. Musk, any comment on the backlash from the chef incident? Are you planning to apologize?" The room went quiet. Cameras zoomed in. Elon shifted his weight, glanced at the floor, then looked up with that familiar half-smirk. "Look," he said, "I've eaten worse. I once survived on instant noodles and expired protein bars in a Siberian warehouse while debugging rocket code. Compared to that, last week's dinner was practically gourmet." He chuckled, expecting laughter, but the room stayed silent. A few journalists exchanged glances. One woman in the front row shook her head almost imperceptibly. The clip of his response went viral, but not in the way he hoped. Headlines read, "Musk doubles down on chef insult," and "When billionaires don't understand hunger." Back at the pop-up kitchen, the chef saw the clip. He didn't get angry. He just sighed, stirred a big pot of soup, and said to his team, "Let him talk. We've got work to do," and they did. That weekend they served over 400 meals. A local news crew came by, not for the drama, but for the story. The real one. They interviewed guests. A single mom who hadn't had a hot meal in days. A veteran who said the stew reminded him of his grandmother's cooking. A teenager who'd never tasted roasted carrots before. The segment ended with the chef handing a bowl to an elderly man and saying, "Eat well. You matter." The video got 500,000 views. Comments poured in. This is what leadership looks like. Real innovation isn't just in labs, it's in kitchens. Thank you for showing us that dignity starts with a full stomach. Elon saw it too. He watched it late at night, alone in his office, the city lights blinking below. For the first time, he didn't see a rival or a critic. He saw someone doing something tangible, immediate, human, and he realized something uncomfortable. His words hadn't just hurt feelings, they'd accidentally spotlighted a problem he'd never truly seen up close. Food waste, hunger, the quiet dignity of feeding others. He didn't post anything, didn't call anyone, but he did something unusual. He pulled up his AI research team's files and typed a simple request. Analyze the nutritional efficiency, scalability, and carbon impact of community-based food rescue models. Compare with current industrial supply chains. His engineers were confused. Since when do we care about soup kitchens? Just run the numbers, he said. Days passed. The chef kept cooking. The pop-up became a movement. People started replicating the model in other cities. Los Angeles, Chicago, Austin. A nonprofit offered funding. A documentary crew asked to follow the story. Through it all, the chef stayed grounded. He still washed dishes. Still hugged his kids before bed. Still believed that food wasn't just fuel. It was connection. And then, one rainy Tuesday, something unexpected happened. A black Cybertruck pulled up to the edge of the lot. Not parked in the VIP spot, there wasn't one, but at the far end near the compost bins. The door opened. Out stepped Elon. No entourage. No cameras. Just him, in the same black t-shirt holding a woven basket covered with a cloth. He walked slowly toward the serving line where the chef was ladling stew into bowls. People noticed. Whispers spread. Some stepped back. Others just watched, curious. The chef looked up. Their eyes met, no words. Just a long, quiet moment. Then Elon lifted the cloth from the basket. Inside were bundles of greens, kale, chard, mustard leaves, all grown in a hydroponic farm powered by solar panels and Starlink internet in West Texas. "From our test site," he said, voice lower than usual. "They said it's some of the cleanest produce they've grown." I thought, maybe you could use it. The chef didn't smile, didn't scowl. He just nodded. "Thank you," he said. Then after a pause, "You staying for lunch?" Elon hesitated, looked around at the folding chairs, the mismatched bowls, the people eating quietly under string lights. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think I will." He sat at the end of a table, accepted a bowl without comment and ate slowly. No jokes, no critiques. Just a man eating soup in the rain, surrounded by strangers who didn't care how much money he had, only that he was there. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not forgiveness, not friendship, but the first fragile thread of understanding. The world didn't know about it yet, but the shift had begun. The rain had let up by mid-morning, leaving the air cool and clean, the kind of freshness that makes everything feel possible. The chef arrived at the pop-up kitchen before sunrise, as he always did, but this time something felt different. Not because of the quiet streets or the damp smell of earth. It was the memory of the night before. The billionaire sitting at a folding table, eating stew like any other guest, saying almost nothing. No grand gesture, no apology, just presence. And that basket of greens still sitting in the walk-in fridge, impossibly vibrant, untouched. He didn't know what to make of it. Part of him wanted to believe it was genuine. Another part braced for a headline. Musk stages charity photo op. But deep down, he remembered the look in the man's eyes. Not the usual sharp confidence, but something softer, almost uncertain. Like he was trying to figure out how to be human again. By 9 a.m., the volunteers started showing up. They chatted over coffee, prepped vegetables, set out tables. No one mentioned the visitor from last night. Not because they didn't notice, but because this place had become something bigger than gossip. It was a rhythm now, a ritual, and into that rhythm walked Elon again. This time without the Cybertruck, just a hoodie and worn sneakers, hands in his pockets like he was trying to disappear. He didn't say much, just nodded at the chef and asked, "Need help?" The chef studied him for a long moment, then pointed to a crate of carrots. "Peel those. Cut them into even coins. Not too thick, not too thin." Elon didn't argue. He rolled up his sleeves, grabbed a peeler, and got to work. At first his movements were stiff, like someone used to giving orders, not taking them. He fumbled with the peeler, nicked his thumb, cursed under his breath. But he kept going. Didn't ask for a bandage, didn't call for an assistant, just wiped the blood on his jeans and kept peeling. People watched, of course, but no one made a scene. One volunteer handed him a clean towel without a word. Another showed him how to hold the knife for cleaner slices. He listened, nodded, tried again. Hours passed like that. Chopping onions, washing greens, stirring pots, sweeping floors. He didn't check his phone once. Didn't mention rockets or AI or Mars. He just worked, quietly, steadily, like he was trying to earn his place in the room. At lunchtime, when the line started forming, Elon served food alongside the others. He handed bowls to people with calloused hands and tired eyes, saying only, "Enjoy," or "Hot today," or nothing at all. A little girl tugged his sleeve and asked if he was the guy from the spaceship videos. He crouched down, looked her in the eye and said, "Yeah, but today I'm just the guy who makes sure you get extra carrots." She grinned. "Cool." Later, during a rare quiet moment, the chef handed him a cup of tea. They stood near the back, watching steam rise from the big stock pots. "Why are you really here?" the chef asked, not unkindly. Elon stared into his cup. "I thought I knew what food was," he said slowly. "Fuel, calories, something to keep the machine running. But last week, I saw how much it means to people. Not just eating, but being seen, being cared for." He paused. "I've built things that go to space, but I've never made something that makes someone feel safe." The chef didn't respond right away. He thought about all the times he'd cooked for his own kids when they were scared or sad. How a warm bowl of soup could say, "I'm here," better than any words. "Food isn't just chemistry," he finally said. "It's memory. It's love. It's saying, you matter enough for me to spend my time on you." Elon nodded, like he was filing that away somewhere deep. As the afternoon wore on, they started talking, not about the viral clip or public image, but about real things. The chef told him about growing up in a home where every scrap was saved, where meals were stretched to feed neighbors during hard times. Elon shared haltingly about nights in his 20s when he'd gone days without eating, surviving on ketchup packets and free coffee refills while coding in internet cafes. "I didn't think about waste back then," he admitted. "I just thought about not starving." "And now?" the chef asked. "Now I see how much gets thrown away while people still go hungry. It doesn't make sense. It's inefficient and it's wrong." That word, wrong, hung in the air, not as a tech problem to solve, but as a moral one. By evening, the kitchen was clean. The last guests had left, and the two men sat on overturned crates under the string lights. The chef pulled out a small container, the original dish from the gala night, the one called Battery Acid Surprise. He'd reworked it since then, balanced the acidity, deepened the sweetness, made the textures more inviting. "Try it again," he said. Elon looked at it, then at him, took a breath, scooped a bite. He chewed slowly, swallowed, then quietly. "It's really good," the chef smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, real one. "Told you there was sweetness underneath." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the city breathe around them. Then Elon said something unexpected. "What if we could scale this? Not just one kitchen. Hundreds, thousands, using AI to match surplus food with communities that need it. Real time. No waste. No waiting." The chef raised an eyebrow. "You want to turn compassion into an algorithm?" "No," Elon said, shaking his head. "I want to remove the friction that keeps good food from reaching hungry people. The logistics are broken. The data exists, we just don't connect it right. Imagine a system that knows a bakery has 200 unsold loaves at 8 p.m., and a shelter 3 blocks away needs breakfast for 150 people. It routes it automatically. Volunteers get alerts. Meals get made. No middleman. No delay," the chef thought about it. It sounded cold at first, machines deciding who eats. But then he pictured the single mom who missed the lunch line because her bus was late, the elderly man who couldn't carry heavy groceries, the kids who only got meals at school. If tech could help get food to them faster, easier, with dignity, maybe it wasn't so cold after all. But it can't just be efficient, he said. It has to be human. The food has to taste like someone cared, not like it came from a warehouse. Agreed, Elon said. That's where you come in. You design the meals. Train the cooks. Make sure it's not just calories. It's comfort. They talked late into the night about solar-powered food trucks, AI that learns local tastes, kitchens run by community members, not corporations. No press, no announcements. Just two people sketching ideas on napkins fueled by leftover stew and a strange new kind of hope. When Elon finally stood to leave, he didn't say goodbye. He just said, "I'll be back tomorrow." Same time? The chef nodded. "Bring your peeler." The next morning he did. And the next? For a full week, the billionaire showed up before dawn, peeled vegetables, washed dishes, served meals, and listened, really listened, to the people who came through the line. He heard stories about eviction notices, medical bills, jobs lost to automation. He saw how a warm meal could lift someone's whole day. And slowly, the man who once called food battery acid began to understand that feeding people wasn't just about nutrients. It was about restoring dignity, one bowl at a time. On the seventh day, as they packed up, Elon turned to the chef and said, "Let's build it." Not as a side project, as something real, something that lasts. The chef looked at him, really looked, and saw not the untouchable icon from the headlines, but a man who'd been humbled, who'd shown up, who'd stayed. "Okay," he said, "but on one condition. Name it, you don't lead it. We do, together, equal say. Your tech, my heart." Elon didn't hesitate. "Deal." And just like that, in a muddy lot behind a quiet kitchen, something new began. Not born from pride or profit, but from a moment of shame, a week of silence, and the quiet courage to change. The world wouldn't hear about it for weeks, but in that space between chopping boards and shared silence, the seeds of something powerful had been planted. And this time, both men were ready to tend to them. 3 months later, the first real test began, not in a boardroom or a press conference, but in a sun-baked neighborhood on the outskirts of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Rain had washed out roads the week before, cutting off small communities from regular food deliveries. Power was still spotty. Many families were relying on canned goods and bottled water. That's when a white van with solar panels on the roof and a simple logo, 2 hands passing a bowl, rolled into town. Inside were 2 people no one expected to see together. The chef, sleeves rolled up as always, and the billionaire, wearing a faded baseball cap and carrying crates of fresh produce like any other volunteer. They'd spent weeks preparing, testing recipes that used local surplus, training community members to run the kitchen, setting up a lightweight AI system that pulled data from grocery stores, farms, and food banks across the island. The tech wasn't flashy. No robots, no holograms, just a tablet that pinged when extra plantains showed up at a market, or when a school cafeteria had leftover rice. Within minutes, someone got a message. "We can use that. Bring it here." The kitchen they set up was in a repurposed community center, just a few stoves, big pots, and long tables. But by noon, the smell of sofrito, roasted sweet potatoes, and black beans filled the air. Kids gathered near the door, eyes wide. Elders came slowly, leaning on canes. A woman with a baby on her hip asked, "Is this really free?" The chef handed her a plate. "And it's made with love," he said. She took a bite, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Tastes like my abuela's." That moment, simple, quiet, human, was what they'd built everything around. The AI handled the logistics, but the heart came from people. Local cooks led the prep. Teenagers helped serve. Even the billionaire spent the day washing dishes in a plastic tub, sweat on his brow, smiling when a little boy asked if he'd really been to space. "Not yet," he said, "but I'm working on it. Right now I'm working on making sure you get seconds." Back in California, news of the pilot started trickling out. At first, skeptics called it a stunt. "Rich guy plays charity for good PR," one headline read. But then photos surfaced, not staged, not filtered, of real meals, real faces, real gratitude. A video showed the chef teaching a group of grandmothers how to turn overripe bananas into sweet plantain fritters, using a recipe optimized by the AI for local ingredients. Another clip captured the billionaire sitting on the floor, sharing a meal with a group of kids, laughing as one tried to feed him a spoonful of rice. People began to notice something unusual. There were no logos plastered everywhere, no branded t-shirts, no speeches about disruption, just food shared quietly with respect. Encouraged, they launched a second pilot in Nairobi. There, the challenge was different, less about surplus, more about distribution. Smallholder farmers often lost crops because they couldn't get them to market in time. The system connected them directly to neighborhood kitchens. A farmer with extra kale could alert the network. A cook 2 miles away would confirm they could use it. Within hours, the greens were in a pot of stew, served to children at a local school. One afternoon, the chef stood in a dusty courtyard watching a group of women stir a giant cauldron. They sang as they worked, voices rising and falling like a prayer. He turned to the billionaire who was adjusting a solar-powered cooler nearby. "This is what it's about," he said. "Not the tech, not the scale. This, right here." The billionaire nodded. "I used to think big meant rockets. Now I see big can also mean making sure a kid in Nairobi doesn't go to bed hungry, because someone figured out how to get food from point A to point B faster." They called the project Nourish, not Musk Feeds or Chef AI, just Nourish. Because that's what it did. It nourished bodies, yes, but also communities, trust, hope. As the pilot succeeded, the world started paying attention. Not just the tech press, but the UN, local governments, even school districts. Invitations poured in. Could you bring this to Detroit, to Manila, to rural Oregon? They said yes, but only if the community led the way. The model wasn't about dropping in a solution. It was about listening first, then building together. Then came the launch event in New York, not in a fancy hotel, but in a converted warehouse in the Bronx. The space was filled with people who'd never been invited to a tech unveiling before. Food bank workers, urban farmers, single parents, retired teachers. On stage, the chef and the billionaire stood side by side, not as celebrity and servant, but as partners. "We didn't build this to win awards," the chef said into the mic, voice steady. "We built it because no one should have to choose between paying rent and feeding their kids. Because good food shouldn't be a luxury. And because sometimes the most powerful technology is the kind that helps us be more human." The billionaire stepped up next. He didn't talk about algorithms or data streams. He talked about the woman in Puerto Rico who cried when she tasted her grandmother's flavors again. He talked about the Kenyan farmer who now sends her kids to school because she's not losing half her harvest. "I used to think innovation was about going faster, higher, farther," he said. "But real innovation is about coming closer to each other." After the speeches, they served dinner. Not canapes or champagne, but big trays of food made from rescued ingredients. Lentil curry with day-old flatbread, roasted vegetable bowls with herb dressing, fruit crumble made from bruised apples. Everyone ate together, at long tables like family. That night, a reporter asked the chef if he ever thought this would happen after that night at the gala. He smiled. "I didn't plan it. But I believed that if you keep showing up with kindness, even after you've been hurt, something good can grow." The billionaire, overhearing, added quietly, "And sometimes the people who hurt you end up teaching you the most." The story spread, not as gossip, but as inspiration. Schools started Nourish Clubs, where students collected cafeteria leftovers to cook meals for neighbors. Cities rewrote food waste policies. Investors who once only cared about returns began asking, "How does this help people?" Most surprisingly, the billionaire started changing too. He still ran his companies, still chased big dreams, but now he made time. Every Friday he'd show up at a Nourish kitchen somewhere in the world. Sometimes he cooked, sometimes he just sat and listened. People stopped seeing him as just a tech titan. They saw a man learning to be part of something bigger than himself. And the chef? He opened a small training kitchen, not for elite chefs, but for anyone who wanted to learn how to cook with what they had. "You don't need fancy tools," he'd say. "You need patience, care, and the belief that everyone deserves to eat well." Months turned into a year. Nourish expanded to over 30 cities. Hunger rates in pilot zones dropped noticeably. Food waste decreased. But the real measure of success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the moments no camera caught. A teenager, teaching their little brother how to chop onions. A widow sharing a meal with neighbors for the first time since her husband passed. A billionaire quietly slipping a $100 bill into a donation jar when no one was looking. One evening back in San Francisco, the two men sat on the same lot where it all began. The pop-up had become a permanent community kitchen now, with a garden out back and solar panels on the roof. Fireflies blinked in the dusk. The city hummed in the distance. "You know," the chef said, sipping tea, "I used to think you were just arrogant. And I thought you were wasting time on things that didn't scale," the billionaire replied, smiling. They both laughed, a real, easy laugh, the kind that only comes after you've been through something hard together. Neither of them knew what came next. More kitchens? A global network? Maybe. But for now, in that quiet moment, it was enough to know they'd turned a moment of shame into something that fed more than just stomachs. It fed souls, and that, more than any rocket or algorithm, felt like true progress. 2 years after that tense dinner in San Francisco, the world looked different, not because of a new rocket or a faster car, but because of something quieter, deeper. It started with a meal, grew through humility, and ended up changing how people thought about food, community, and even each other. The project they'd built together, Nourish, was now operating in over 100 cities across 6 continents. But the real story wasn't in the scale. It was in the small, everyday moments that no press release could capture. One of those moments happened on a rainy afternoon in Brooklyn. The chef stood in the kitchen of a modest community center, sleeves rolled past his elbows, stirring a pot of stew made from surplus squash, lentils, and herbs grown in window boxes by local seniors. The space smelled like warmth and earth, like home. At a corner table, the billionaire sat alone, wearing a plain gray hoodie, no entourage, no fanfare. He'd driven himself there in a regular sedan, parked 2 blocks away so no one would notice. He wasn't there for a photo op. He was there because it was Friday, the day he always showed up no matter where he was in the world. Sometimes he chopped vegetables, sometimes he washed dishes. Today he was just waiting. The chef walked over, holding 2 small plates. On each sat a single portion of that once infamous dish, the compressed root vegetables, the mushroom wrap, the plum kombu glaze. Only now it was smoother, richer, balanced with a touch of roasted garlic and a sprinkle of toasted seeds. He set one plate in front of the billionaire and sat down across from him. "Remember this?" the chef asked, a faint smile playing on his lips. The billionaire looked at the plate, then up at him. "How could I forget? I called it battery acid." And now, he took a bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. Then quietly, "Better than rocket fuel." They both laughed. Not the polished kind you hear in interviews, but the real, tired, grateful laugh of people who've walked a long road together. Outside, rain tapped gently on the windows. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with life. Teens prepping meals for homebound elders, volunteers packing weekend food kits for school kids, a grandmother teaching a group how to make bread from leftover grains. None of them paid much attention to the man at the corner table. To them, he was just another pair of hands willing to help. That was the miracle of it all. The fame, the fortune, the headlines, they'd all faded into the background. What remained was something far more valuable: trust, respect, shared purpose. A few weeks earlier, Nourish had received the United Nations' highest environmental honor. At the ceremony in Nairobi, the chef stood at the podium while the billionaire sat in the front row, clapping louder than anyone. When asked what the award meant, the chef said simply, "It means we're not alone anymore. It means people finally understand that feeding each other is the most human thing we can do." Back in Brooklyn, after they finished eating, the billionaire didn't leave right away. He helped clean up, stacking bowls, wiping counters. As he was about to go, a young boy, maybe 10 years old, ran up to him, holding a slightly crumpled drawing. "I made this for you," he said shyly. It was a crayon sketch of a kitchen with two stick figures cooking together. One had a tall hat. The other had a rocket drawn above his head. At the bottom, in uneven letters, "Thank you for the food." The billionaire crouched down, took the drawing carefully and said, "This is the best thing I've ever been given." He kept it in his office after that, taped to the wall beside blueprints for Mars habitats and neural interfaces. A reminder that the future wasn't just about going farther. It was about coming back, to the table, to each other, to what matters. Meanwhile, the chef had opened a small culinary school in Oakland, funded not by flashy investors, but by donations from people who'd eaten at the pop-up kitchens and wanted to give back. The students weren't aspiring celebrity chefs. They were single parents, formerly incarcerated individuals, refugees, people who'd been told they didn't belong in fine dining. But here, in this sunlit space with secondhand stoves and walls covered in handwritten recipes, they learned that cooking wasn't about perfection. It was about care, about turning what others discard into something nourishing. One of his first graduates now ran a Nourish kitchen in Detroit, feeding hundreds every week. Another started a mobile food cart in New Orleans, using storm-damaged produce to make hot meals after hurricanes. The ripple was real, and the billionaire? He'd quietly woven food sustainability into the core of his companies. Tesla's latest master plan included partnerships with urban farms. Starlink helped remote villages connect to food-sharing networks. Even Neuralink began exploring how brain data could help tailor nutrition for people with dietary needs, always with the chef's team advising on the human side. "Tech without empathy is just noise," he told his engineers during a meeting. "Make sure we never forget that." People noticed the change, not just in his companies but in him. He spoke less about disruption and more about connection. He still had his sharp edges, his restless energy, but now there was a softness underneath. Like someone who'd finally learned that being powerful didn't mean never being wrong. One evening, as he walked through a Nourish kitchen in Lisbon, a volunteer asked, "Do you ever regret what you said that night at the gala?" He stopped, looked around. At the steam rising from pots, the laughter of cooks, the line of people waiting patiently for dinner, and said, "I regret the hurt, but I don't regret what came after." Sometimes you need to fall hard to learn how to stand with others. The original viral clip, the one of him calling the dish battery acid, still existed online. But now when people shared it, they added context. "This is where it started," they'd write, "and this is where it led." Below, they'd link to videos of community kitchens, smiling faces, kids learning to cook. The story had been rewritten, not by PR teams, but by real people living it every day. On a quiet Sunday morning, the chef and the billionaire met again, this time at a small farm outside Austin. It was one of the first places where they'd tested their solar-powered hydroponic system. Rows of greens grew under gentle LED lights, fed by rainwater and run on clean energy. Bees buzzed in nearby wildflowers. Chickens pecked at the dirt. They walked in silence for a while, boots crunching on gravel. Finally, the chef said, "Do you think we changed anything?" The billionaire looked out over the fields. "I used to measure change in launches and stock prices and followers. Now I measure it in full bellies, in kids who go to school fed, in farmers who don't have to watch their harvest rot. Yeah, I think we changed something." "But it wasn't us," the chef said. "It was everyone who showed up. The volunteers, the cooks, the people who believed food could be a bridge, not a barrier." "Maybe," the billionaire replied. "But someone had to start." They stood there for a long time, watching the sun climb higher. No cameras, no speeches. Just two men who'd once been on opposite sides of a dinner table, now standing side by side in a field of green, knowing they'd helped plant something that would keep growing long after they were gone. Later that week, the chef posted a photo on his rarely used social media account. It showed two empty plates on a wooden table, sunlight streaming through the window. No caption, just the image. Within hours, thousands of people commented, full circle. From humiliation to hope. This is what healing looks like. And in a quiet office thousands of miles away, the billionaire saw the post, smiled, and closed his laptop. He had a flight to catch, to a village in Ghana where a new Nourish kitchen was opening the next day. He packed a simple bag, a change of clothes, a notebook, and a small jar of the chef's signature plum kombu glaze, just in case they needed a taste of home. The world kept spinning. Rockets still launched. Markets still rose and fell. But somewhere in cities and villages across the globe, people were sitting down to eat. Food made with care, shared with dignity, born from a moment of shame that turned into a lifetime of purpose. And that, more than anything, was the real shock. Not the feud, not the fame, but the quiet, stubborn truth that even the most broken moments can lead to something beautiful. If you're willing to show up, stay humble, and pass the bowl,